Hi, Liz.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm doing all right.
Hello.
Very good, very good.
Happy to Thursday? It
Almost
has to be
Friday.
Thursday. I'm seeing you, shiny people.
Almost Friday, Sarah.
Yeah,
I
little
did a
Friday.
fun experiment yesterday with using OpenTelemetry JavaScript.
Whoa.
Oh, cool.
How'd
Cool.
that go?
It was rougher than I would have liked, but still it worked fine. Like, it took me 90 minutes to figure out, how do you actually send OTLP? Right, the difficult part was not getting auto instrument working. It was how do you send OTLP?
Is that a documentation buff or a how it happens buff?
It is a documentation bug, so
Okay.
I will go and tidy that up or like write a guide or something. But yeah, so
Potentially.
yeah, I have, I've had a completely uninstrumented app that I got instrumented in 90 minutes. I would rather have
That's
it
pretty
have
good.
been 30 minutes, but also don't know TypeScript at all. So yeah, fun adventures in DevRel land.
Exactly. So, but
It
JavaScript,
was amusing.
yeah, it takes some time to, get. I mean, if you have all the NPM packages and everything well documented, I mean, it's kind of a scattered experience right now. I mean, when we added the X-ray, propagators and the resource detectors, again, it was just something that it's still work in progress.
Yep, there's tidying up to be done in all
Yep.
of this.
Yep.
I don't know why we actually talk about things as completed, even if it's versioned.
Agreed.
Yeah, we don't pay enough attention to maintenance, I think, in open source, broadly speaking, and gardening, basically.
Yeah, I mean that in itself, I mean, it's a good area to think about because I think that the TC has both roles, right? I mean, not only kind of providing the leadership on the technical, improvements and features on the project, but also on just the health of the code base and other infrastructure. So I think that that's something that I'd love to see more folks in the TC take up on.
It looks like we only have one agenda item today, and Dan added it, but I haven't seen him yet.
He's on vacation according to the calendar.
Okay. Separate maintainership for contrib repos. I suspect that's a thing we can push if we need to.
Yeah, so just the background there, as part of figuring out our story around instrumentation, there's just the central issue, which is we don't feel like we currently have capacity to maintain instrumentation to a large degree. That's problematic because, for one, one of the main purposes of this project is to provide high quality instrumentation to people. So it's problematic if we can't do that. At the same time, it's definitely the case that we don't appear to have the SIG staffed in such a way that
that we could bring in other projects.
It's not that maintainers are being lazy. So part of it is we need to actually have a game plan together for like how we are going to approach instrumentation. This is something we're actively working on right now. I'd like to devote more time to it myself. And part of that is how are we going to manage this ecosystem? There really is a tension here between just to make it clear, the problem is if we say, hey, people just go write your own instrumentation for the time being. Like, we're just going to say like, no, it's better you go maintain it over there. Then at least it's clear who's maintaining this thing, rather than saying, yes, come in, we'll add your thing to the garbage heap we call contrib, and then we'll make you like an code owner of that. And then like everyone's going to be confused. Like, just go maintain it over there. If we do that, then it's not clear how we install those things for people, because OpenTelemetry really, really benefits from that instrumentation being discoverable and automatically installed for people to the degree to which we can do that. That's like a huge difficulty in getting started, because if you fail to install a piece of instrumentation, it breaks context propagation. End users who don't have a lot of information or understanding of what they're supposed to be getting, it just like the more we can install that stuff for them, the better. So if we say instrumentation should be written somewhere else, which we have to, no matter what, there's always going to be instrumentation written somewhere else. We have to solve that problem. So that's actually like something that requires like design and thought and effort to be put into it. Like we have a registry, so we think we can improve this registry to maybe actually even being an API that these things like we use like as part of OpenTelemetry to identify what's available in a operational sense. That's like a heavy load we're going to put on a service if everyone using OpenTelemetry is pinging some kind of API when they're trying to install OpenTelemetry. And then we need to also solve the like security aspect of this to some degree, which is like open source in the 21st century is a supply chain attack. And this is like, I just, there's a general feeling like we should address that on some level. Like there should be, and what gets thrown out there is like, oh, well, we could have like blue check partners, people who, for whatever reason, we feel like we're aware of who they are and we think they're like recommended. But even that.
Speaking of supply chain attacks, my hope is that the TC will take up incident management for the supply chain attack that just impacted us.
Yep. I mean,
I didn't hear about this one.
I was talking to Liz, I was talking to some of the maintainers this morning, and again, they were also asking about, we should define some process for triaging, when there are incident reports of this sort. And some kind of a process, because there's no process right now, right? I mean, do we all assemble in a triage room? What decisions do we need to take, and how do we handle P0 vulnerabilities?
That's great. We should have a Slack channel for this that all the maintainers are part of, or alerted in the maintainers channel.
Yep. But I mean, I don't know, Ted, if you heard about the curl. The code cover.
Right. Like we asked people specifically, move to GitHub Actions. We told people like, hey, you should probably have code coverage of some kind. I think most people picked the CodeCov tool, and it turns out the CodeCov tool has had a backdoor since January 31st. Yep.
And it affects, not only us, but several projects, obviously.
God, the irony. Oh, fuck.
Yeah, right. Like that was my reaction this morning was, oh, fuck. But also like, hopefully there are no secrets right in our code. It's just, it is our code. And so, right, the question is just, double checking. Do we have any secrets that could have been exfiltrated? Do we need to rotate them? Number two, like, do we need to, do we need to rebuild any artifacts, right, that may have been tainted?
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
So.
Yeah. So that's the thing. And here's how I think the blue check approach to instrumentation doesn't fully solve the problem, which is instrumentation's a requirement, which means if someone needs Kafka JS plugin, like if they need Kafka JS instrumentation and Jobob supplies Kafka JS instrumentation for OpenTelemetry, it doesn't matter if there's a blue check next to the name or not. Like that's just what the end user is stuck with. So in a world where we have like multiple copies of instrumentation, it's like helpful to know, oh, this is the trusted one, but this is like gonna be like long-term managing our instrumentation ecosystem is like the big effort in this project. So anyways,
sorry, can we not leverage an existing registry of some sort or several of them in order to do this instead of talking about our own registry? Because that always makes me nervous.
Yeah, so the first thing that needs to be investigated, and I was talking about this with some AWS people, Yana and crew, yesterday, Aloita, by the way, at the end of the Lambda call, which is like, first, thing that needs to be investigated is this is a problem that gets like language specific. So kind of like step one is actually like, what are the needs and requirements in every language to
language.
have a really good auto installation experience?
Yep.
And like, how does that bubble up? Because we can't, it's nice to say like, oh, we'll make a registry, but that doesn't, like, how does that thing
Exactly.
interact with package managers? and all
That,
that
that's
stuff?
correct. Exactly. And
Good.
that's precisely the point. So I mean, Sarah, I think that, you know, we absolutely as a project should be doing an evaluation of existing tools, you know, that are just used, like for example, GitHub as a container registry, but that's only for, you know, I mean, very specific usage.
Right.
How do we integrate that with packages? So I agree.
Yeah.
We should look at it.
Cool.
And specifically like requirements gathering, we just need to understand for each language, what are the requirements here? So that whatever tools we're picking, we know they're gonna work. So that's effort, you know, that needs someone to do research.
This may actually be in the vein of the same question that I got asked last week or a week and a half ago, which was Anurang from AWS mentioned last week that he and Ted were chatting about possibly hosting vendor Java agent distros in the OTel repos. What is this? You know, what is this? What's the backstory? What does this sound familiar, Ted? First.
Yeah, so I think this is familiar to both me and Alalita. I believe,
Okay.
Assuming this isn't some other thing, we're specifically talking about Lambda is the area where this has come up, where we want to start publishing artifacts for people to run open telemetry on Lambda, right? So there's, you know, the thing that's most easy for people is to have these Lambda layers be published in every region that have open telemetry stuff. And then you hit this question of like, okay, so the open telemetry that you get, which is like a collector combined with like some Python open telemetry or whatever, what's actually installed there. And it's especially tricky with Lambda because the actual image size matters.
Has to be
So
tiny.
just throwing the kitchen sink collector in there is actually problematic because what the user pays for is like total image size, and that thing is large. So we're like looking at stripped down ones, and the initial thing was like, well, you know, Amazon can made like a stripped down one. But then this led to also naturally all the vendors being like, well, but I want my thing in there. And then
I'm pretty sure that's exactly
like,
where my question came up.
Yeah.
How come
and so,
AWS, not me?
Exactly.
Yeah,
and then it's
and
like you can just see the optics of this getting annoying.
Yeah, but I mean, Sarah, specifically what, you know, again, my guidance has been on our AWS side is to actually make sure that OTel has a Lambda layer available for any, you know, a generic one is that generic enough with OTLP support that actually serves as a baseline, and then any vendor or anyone else, you know, who has a component that they want to add to a initial configuration can easily do so, right? So exactly as Ted said, you know, can we actually support OTLP as a baseline, which means that having the OTLP exporter and the and just that layer being available, and also you know, we plan to add build your own documentation and, you know, a script so that that's easy to build out, but providing at least a baseline on the project, which is maintained by us, and at the same time, you know, then any specialization that is needed on for AWS specific services is available downstream on the distribution, not necessarily, you know,
in that baseline template.
Right.
Yeah,
but
and
it's
we
not
made some. Sorry. Yeah, we made some progress on this in the last Lambda meeting yesterday, as far as like kind of really getting this to gel up, which is to provide basically like upstream a CI/CD process that
Yep.
publishes all these Lambda layers for a super stripped down, super
Yep.
basic version of this that just exports OTLP and just contains the amount of like X-ray stuff that you actually need to run this stuff on Lambda, because Lambda's got some restrictions right now around like what headers it uses. Anyways, and then downstream, Amazon is going to have a version of that CI/CD that publishes like the Amazon distro, which
Yeah.
contains more stuff and also has gone through, you know, the additional checks Amazon requires.
So you're calling this a Lambda image or a Lambda artifact. Is it useful to any functions as a service other than Lambda? Because that's, I mean, if we, yeah, this is going to be the challenge in it, I think. I
Yeah,
understand your
but-
point.
But you know what it does serve as, Sarah, is in reference implementation that
Yep.
actually can be then extended for any other, you know, serverless implementation. So the idea is not, you know, that it's Lambda specific. It's just that it's a reference implementation, and then that can be actually made available for any provider.
Can we potentially publish it then as a minimum artifact, you know, reference implementation kind of thing, as opposed to a Lambda artifact?
Yeah,
'Cause
yeah,
I
yeah. I
think
mean, that's what I had in mind, Sarah. That
okay,
you know,
cool.
again, that provides a baseline, because you know you have to be very specific. I mean, unfortunately, on the implementation, when you are providing an initial, you know, reference, right? And then we can extend it. The hope was to extend.
And the secret here is that what we want to offer to the community is a clonable CI/CD platform.
Yep.
Yes.
So if Datadog or someone else is like, we want to have Lambda layers published that include our exporter, then the way that's done is not shoving everything back into one collector. It's you just take this CI/CD platform and then have it build the collector
Your
plugin
variation
that you want. And likewise, end users can do this. And I think we have to maybe do some more work in general around the collector, and like not thinking about the collector as like one canonical build because it's a plugin thing, and thinking about how we explain to end users, like, you know, here's how one builds a collector, but here's like we have to kind of define what the collector means in concrete terms at some point around copyright and other things. And I think it's got to relate to like, these are officially sanctioned plugins, but you can make a build out of any combination of these plugins that you want. And Lambda is just a concrete example of where the kitchen sink thing doesn't work.
And the concrete example makes perfect sense. I just don't want us to get into a space where we're, you know, how come Splunk's collector isn't there? How come, you know, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Exactly.
Exactly.
I think Bogdan's been trying to jump in for a moment.
My concern here is not about why Datadog Splunk is not there. My big concern is why AWS Lambda versus Azure serverless or GCP function. So this is where the question we need to answer more than I think for the other one, as long as we support OTLP, we are done. We can say that, hey, OTLP is the right thing to be done in minimum thing. But why AWS Lambda versus Azure function or whatever is called Azure Lambda? I don't know. No.
Yeah, Azure functions. You were right.
Right.
Google calls them function as well.
I think Bogdan, it's just a question of adding those. So the idea was that again, you know, with the reference example available initially, then Azure functions or, you know, Google serverless implementations can be available. So I mean, again, I think it's just timing more so than
but I think that's where the questions to Sarah came from.
Yeah.
I'm pretty confident that they did not ask about insight. They more likely ask about why Azure function is not there. So
Which is why I was asking about the generalized, like, could this be a generalized layer? And maybe it can, maybe it can't. Yeah.
And I would say the thing is these things get specific really quick. Like,
Yeah.
So then
they
maybe we
had to
just
do a lot
plan-
of tinkering to make this work properly with Lambda, and like an
Mhm.
Amazon Lambda layer is like a specific
thing.
thing that's not a
Yep.
general thing. So,
Yeah.
but the
So
pattern
then
could be
can
replicated.
can we work to reach out to each of the serverless groups of the top 4 or 5 clouds to make sure we have a reference for each of them then? Because I think that's the only other way to do it fairly.
Yeah, Sarah, I mean, we had already reached out. I mean, I've already spoken with Punya's team at Google, and you know, they were totally going to, I mean, they have been involved in the Lambda discussions, you know, which
Mhm.
we have every week on the SIG. So
Has anyone
you
from
know,
Microsoft serverless joined?
I don't think anybody's involved actively on the project. If I
Okay.
could get a contact, then I'd be happy
Yep.
to, you know, get them involved, because I'd love to
Yep.
see an implementation example there.
Mhm.
And,
Yep.
you know, again, that's the idea, right? That how do we make this available to the users so that, you know, whatever they're using, they have the choice available.
Mhm.
Yeah, we can't make people do the work, right? Like we can offer
no,
them
absolutely.
partnership and an opportunity
Yep.
to work on this, but like,
Yes,
Yeah.
Totally.
exactly.
Totally
exactly.
understand that. And no, I'm not suggesting that Alita should pony up engineers to go make it, you know,
Yeah.
make a reference implementation for Microsoft functions or Azure functions. But
Yeah.
you know, just I want to make sure that that there's not a first among equals perception.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But there is a pattern that we had to get right here. So I'm glad we did just one, which is the question when
That's
these
cool.
things do move off into proprietary land, like what lives upstream and what lives elsewhere. And the answer I think we came up with is what we create is a build process for that thing
Mhm.
Yeah.
that
Mhm.
ships a like minimal open telemetry
stub.
thing, either that's
Yeah.
like the collector with all the things or minimum, whatever it is, like some
Yep.
non-vendor specific open telemetry thing. And
Mhm.
but that thing is then clonable for people to adjust however it is that they need. And so open up upstream, we provide like the reference architecture for how one publishes this stuff or whatever.
Maybe a rename of the repo to call it serverless instead of Lambda at one point, not now.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think
It would be appreciated from the competition of AWS.
yeah, I agree, Bob. Again, we had initially proposed serverless, you know, as the work group, but I think because it was specific to the initial, you know, implementation discussion.
Yep. Totally
I'm
makes
happy
sense.
to rename that working
Mhm.
group.
I mean,
It's actually not clear to me whether you would have one repo with all this stuff shoved into it. I think that'll
Yeah.
come down to like how much is like practically shareable versus how much does that just cause like all of the issues to get mishmashed together and like annoy things like that.
yeah. And I think with regard to other kinds of instrumentation, I anticipate less of a problem, right? Because when it comes to like, you know, a framework like Express, right? Like either it is baked into the OpenTelemetry contrib repo, or the framework, right, decides to just bake the OTel APIs into their code, right? Like I don't anticipate to have a need for, you know, a bunch of third parties that are not the library framework and they're not in OTel contrib, right? Like I don't anticipate that that's going to be a very common case.
Yep.
Right, like it's just this particular case where you know, obviously AWS is not going to be modifying every single Lambda function that's run, and where it can't obviously, you know, easily go into contrib repo where we have this kind of template pattern that needs to be done.
Yep.
Agreed.
Yeah, I just want to make sure we don't get into a spot where the industry equates AMI with VM. Because we were there. We were there 6 years ago.
There. Exactly. It's
Yes,
definitely
we're
not.
firmly wearing my
relatable.
open source hat.
I
And,
agree.
you know, hiding my
and like
Microsoft
we've
hat.
also right like you know, I applaud Lightstep and I applaud everyone else
Yeah.
who's done like these just distros or launchers, right? Like to very clearly brand, you know, this is the proprietary bit and this is where the upstream
Yep.
bits are, and we support either, right?
Yeah.
The thing we don't want to see is right like where people are like, you know, you are on your own if you're not using our launcher, right? Like because that
Yep.
that sucks, right? And I'm glad that
Yeah.
Exactly.
And
Agreed.
we do
And-
need to, yes, sorry, go ahead.
No, I mean and you know, the objective exactly was, especially for the Lambda, you know, implementation. It's very easy for AWS to go and say that, you know, it's very AWS specific, so we'll just do it on the distro. But I was very specifically interested in OTel actually having a, you know, agnostic layer available, which can be extended for, you know, just as a reference, which can be then used by anybody to extend, right? So if you have to maintain that, we are committed to that upstream first, you know, approach, and I do want it to be part of the DNA of all the work that we do at AWS.
And we do need, I mean, I know we're heads down just trying to ship right now, and that's fine, but we are going to need to concretely define in hopefully legally backed terms what distros mean, because while I think the core community is generally going to be like focused on doing the right thing, it's going to be inevitable that two things happen. Someone's going to ship a client thing they're calling OpenTelemetry that has OpenTelemetry API extensions, right? Like, yeah, it's OpenTelemetry, but with this better API with more features. So like use this thing and get stuck on our distro, quote unquote, right? That'll be one form of embrace extend. And then the other thing you'll see is like people shipping some kind of mystery meat collector, like where they're calling it OpenTelemetry collector, but it's just like a bunch of proprietary who knows what. And we're just, it'll be better to figure out as a group, like what do we want these things to be defined as, at least in terms of terminology, so that when someone does ship one of those things, it's open source, you can be like, yeah, you can ship it, but you just can't call that thing OpenTelemetry. Like you have to call that something else, because it's either mystery meat or it's like a proprietary extension of something that we think you shouldn't extend or whatever it is.
But Ted, that's exactly why, I mean, just like Sarah alluded to, the conformance program is what we intend to use, right? On OTel, we just don't have the you know, focus right now to actually kick this off in a formal way, but we absolutely should be using the conformance program and the same kind of similar guidelines as what Kubernetes did with the testing and certification for the project also.
Yeah, we're just relying on best behavior right now, and it's great that we have a committed group, but that's not what we want to rely on long term.
Yep. We have to. I mean, we have to have a process for that.
Yeah. Cool.
We have 1 minute. We did get through this auto instrumentation, Ted. Oh, someone else is helping with notes. Thank you.
Yeah, I was just adding that. Sarah.
Thank you. That's awesome.
Folks were just discussing it.
But that was awesome. Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah.
And just one more thing I wanted to bring up, which I didn't add here, I will, is the incubation, you know, update
status, where we are.
And Morgan and I have been following up with Elena on, you know, any items that she's requested. She's also been on the DD channel on Slack. So again, anyone, you know, please feel free to respond to her whenever she has questions. But I think they're in the process of just interviewing and chatting with different customers and end users right now.
Yeah.
Cool.
Sarah, have you heard anything else?
I have not. I have not had anything come my way that wasn't in the Slack channel, the shared Slack channel, or previous requests that have been handled or routed to the shared channel. Of course, now I'm looking for where my CNCF connection is on Slack. There we go. Haha, no little red dots. Brilliant.
One final thing reminder, we have a user study out. There's a user research Slack channel. Matt McCleary has done a great job putting together a user study form, and we're at the phase now we should be shouting that out and spreading it around. So just FYI, if you haven't checked that out, please tweet it out and share it within your organization. Otherwise, try to get feedback. It's super helpful. It's like we've got maybe 15 responses so far, so that's great. Yeah. On that note,
Great.
I
Good
think-
meeting. Thanks again, everyone. Have a
Super
good day.
fast.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.